Welcome to the ACC Panic Room alongside Lauren Brownlow. I'm Joe Ovies. We got to talk about some potential changes in Chapel Hill and Durham in just a little bit, but let's actually start with NC State, which I thought NC State responded nicely after their loss to Miami. It was a bit of a slog. They couldn't run the ball, but at the beginning of the fourth quarter, Devin Leary finally broke that game open with, I thought, a really nice design play call, and Louisville's defense kind of broke in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think NC State's offense eventually made plays. They kind of did what they needed to do late in the game. I think had Louisville's offense gotten going a little earlier, it may have been looked back upon as a missed opportunity by NC State's offense, but they didn't. And that's where I wanted to focus, honestly, is on the defense.
Because yes, the defense was the thing to me. Yeah, the defense was the thing. I mean, I tweeted this out last night. I felt like NC State wore Louisville down. Malik Cunningham and Gilio and I talked about this on Friday. Like, Malik Cunningham, the quarterback for Louisville, was like the type of guy that you would worry about, that like NC State fans were worried about Miami the week before had De'Aaron King been healthy, right?
Right.
So the way Louisville's offense had been playing, and they've been in some pretty wild games this ACC season, I thought maybe that's where it was going to be a bit of a track meet. It did not end up being a track meet. I think that a lot of it goes to some missed opportunities from Louisville, but ultimately NC State's defense did a really good job containing them.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. Like, I kept looking at the score and I'm just like, wow, how is this still where it is? Like, how is NC State's? And I had both games on, but obviously, like, North Carolina's was the one I was work-wise responsible for following. So I had the volume on that one. I keep looking over there and I'm just like, they keep just making tackles in space and just like getting them off the field. And I'm just like, man, this defense, every time it is called upon. And I was actually like, I was getting deja vu until like the fourth quarter. I was getting a little deja vu in terms of the way I was feeling towards NC State's offense, where I was like, look, listen, y'all, they've lost 4 starters now, and they're out here doing this against the best offense they've seen all year. What are y'all doing? You got to score some points, man. And finally they did that, because I just was like, this defense deserves that after the way they played. And it was, coaches talk about this all the time with like complimentary football and whatever, but it was that in that sense. And Doran said it all week. He's like, the offense is going to have to carry us, except it turns out the defense carried them, and then the offense just sort of finished the job in the fourth quarter. It's pretty unbelievable. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe you recontextualize the Miami loss. I still think that game came down to you turn around a drop on a third quarter, on a third down. You turn around biting on the snap count on the field goal, or if the right guy picks up the fumble, and that game completely turns around for NC State last week down in Miami. But Tyler Van Dyke, I feel like I have to spend another week for the Miami quarterback saying, hey man, my bad. We had our fun going into the NC State game. You balled out there, and then against Pitt, against the Heisman guy, Kenny Pickett, he balled out again. So, like, I don't know, maybe
isn't it wild? Like, win or lose, when teams have played North Carolina. I mean, I can at least think of a few teams that after they played North Carolina, whether they beat them or didn't, they sort of like it sort of catapulted them a little bit. Like,
well, it's interesting you bring that up. So to wrap the thread on NC State, the win keeps things spicy in the Atlantic. Right now, Wake Forest is undefeated. There is a non-conference game against North Carolina coming up.
People, don't forget that. I know
that is a non-conference game.
Don't forget that it's not.
So if you're an NC State fan, doing some scoreboard watching and hoping that Wake gets that L, this ain't the one. Okay, so just hope that Sam Hartman, if you're a State fan who likes to watch North Carolina lose, you want Sam Hartman and that offense to just completely crush North Carolina, because it's inconsequential to the ACC race, because it is a non-conference race. That being said, they still have one loss in the conference. Wake Forest clearly still undefeated after beating Duke, which we'll get to in a little bit. So things stay spicy in the Atlantic. But to your point about North Carolina, they go to Notre Dame after the bye week, and I understand what head coach Mack Brown is trying to do. Mack Brown, if you're looking for fiery Mack Brown after a press conference, after a loss, you're just not going to get it. Mack Brown goes to his talking points. And I thought it was curious after the loss to Notre Dame that when he got a legitimate question about the defense and their preparation after an off week against a Notre Dame squad, Lauren, that you and I both know isn't exactly the most dynamic offense right now in college football, to have the kind of day that Notre Dame had with season highs all over the place, that, to your point about kind of, using North Carolina as a way to get some momentum. I mean, did we not kind of see that defensively up in South Bend last night?
Yeah, are they like, for lack of a better, like to use a baseball term, are they like the slump buster?
They might be. I mean, right now,
Florida State.
North Carolina's defense is the problem. There was a screen grab captured last night where Sam Howell was like on the bench after just having another monster performance. Just like the attitude was like, do I have to do everything? And you just need a stop from North Carolina's defense. A stop. That's all you need.
You can't get it.
And they really couldn't do that.
I tweeted, by the way, after they scored with 7.5 minutes to go, Carolina did. Mm-hmm. And it was like a minute before they scored-ish. And I was like, I might onside kick it. Like, I'm kind of half joking, but half not. They didn't get the ball again until there was 1:37 remaining, and they were down 2 scores.
And Mac, after the game, is talking about, well, neither defense played great tonight. Man, that ain't what we're talking about, Mac.
Mm-mm.
No, we're not talking about the other defense.
Yeah, y'all have a good offense. That's why one of them didn't.
Right. Like, it's not what are you saying that, if it was a defensive slugfest, you would have been happy with that? No. You can't sit here and just say, oh, yeah, both defenses, not a great night. It was just back and forth. Okay, no, so your defense is the thing that's the highlight. Your defense has to make stops. Your defense had a bye week to prepare, and they've gotten worse as the season's gone on. I have to imagine that Jay Bateman's done after the season.
I would think so. I mean, it was interesting to hear, and Jeremiah Gemmel is one of UNC's, senior leaders, linebacker, and he's a really smart guy, and he loves to break everything down. I was listening to him in postgame, and he was just talking about, he was careful to say, he said, I don't think the calls were bad. That's what he said. He's like, I think that what happens is we start having things, and this is a common thing you hear a lot of, by the way, like when things start going badly on defense, a lot of players will want to try to do not only their own job, but someone else's, which inevitably means that their own job doesn't get done as well. And that's how you get part of what you get. However, he also agreed that Jeremiah did that, like, they're not tackling well, they're not, there's just a lot that's going wrong, but
look at the 91-yard touchdown. Yeah. That was a byproduct of terrible tackling.
Yeah. And the thing about it is that, like, I am not a smart enough football person to know how much of it is a scheme issue versus how much of it is like a players executing issue. But at the end of the day, and most coaches will tell you this, if your players aren't executing, whether it's Bateman's fault or position coach's fault on the defense, whoever it is, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but it's something ain't working here, clearly. So, they got to figure out what that is. Mac's just, the thing about Mac for in cases like this is he's tough on his coordinators. It's been interesting to listen to him talk about them. Like, he will like straight up admit when he questions one of their calls, like a fan, he even says, but that's because he gives them a lot of autonomy, I think. But it's a weird, like, management type of relationship that I'm not sure that most people are used to when it comes to coaches and their coordinators.
Do you think it's a talent issue on defense?
No.
Okay. Because you talk about, and this is why I think it's clearly about scheme. And I'm with you. I'm not trying to pretend to be this uber smart football person, but I do know my triangle football history. And there was a time where Gene Chizik was the defensive coordinator for North Carolina.
Yes.
And Gene Chizik was dealing with a talent level that is not where Mac Brown has taken it in terms of recruiting. And they found a way to scheme into a bend, don't break type defense, okay? This defense breaks a lot. And it also comes down to needless penalties, too. Let's not put it all on the defense, too. I mean, how many holding calls are putting you in bad position?
And they're always like when they just scored or had a big game, inevitably.
Right. So, it's one of these things where North Carolina finds itself continuously making life difficult for themselves, whether it's within the context of defense or some self-inflicted wounds with mistakes on offense. And now they find themselves at 4-4 this year. And, going to Notre Dame and losing isn't exactly like the deal breaker.
No.
And when you go to Notre Dame, you're going to have some things that don't exactly go your way. I think most people understand that when we talk about Notre Dame football. But nobody was expecting them to come out of this game at 4-4, going to Wake Forest. And if you've talked about defensive problems all day, now you're going up against an offense that's like precision timing. And any mistake is going to be made worse for you. And I'll be curious to see how that plays out next week.
Yeah, me too. And, again, you mentioned Sam sort of feeling like he has to do it himself, and like he does. Although I will say this, that was kind of more of a vintage Sam Howell performance last night.
I agree.
I mean, you could see it looked more like last year and the previous year's version of Sam. He seemed freer. He seemed very locked in. He was super competitive. I mean, even when he was getting like gang tackled by 6 Notre Dame players, he was just like determined not to let his legs stop moving. And I was just like, okay, that's kind of the little extra bit of Sam that I feel like we hadn't really seen as much this year. And it was back in that game. It was at least fun to watch them on offense. I mean, that was how I think we expected them to look more this year. And it's wild to think that they did that, at Notre Dame as opposed to last year's offense that was better. I mean, Notre Dame's defense was better too, but whatever. You get what I'm saying. Like, it's crazy. It's like if they could have only because the defense played great against Notre Dame last year. And Mac even mentioned that. He's like, they played really well against them last year and not so much this year. So yeah, it's bad too to see them keep getting worse, whether it's game by game or even year over year. That's not what you want to see.
Yeah, you don't want to see that. And again, going to Wake Forest is going to be that's some sickos football potential right there.
Is that going to be like the BYU Virginia game where it gets like?
Yeah, I mean, it has every potential to be like that. I mean, Wake Forest right now is with the other Sam Hartman, are running really efficient football, and it's fun to watch. But on the flip side of that, they beat a Duke team that continues to just look defeated all around. And we're at the point right now, we're sitting here talking about coordinator changes for North Carolina potentially. I have to imagine that Nina King, the new athletics director at Duke, is going to have to make some hard decisions or have a hard conversation with David Cutcliffe at the end of the season, because I don't see where you can really bring Cutcliffe back after the way that this year has gone. And this is a little bit of football history here. Wake Forest and Duke, to me, have always shared a little bit of a symbiotic relationship, okay?
Yeah, they're similar.
David Cutcliffe is here in Durham because of what Wake Forest had done with their commitment to football and giving Jim Grobe an opportunity to come up with a plan, redshirt everybody, and then eventually build towards 2006 season where they ended up in the Orange Bowl. You'll go back and you will remember that there was like a football summit for Duke because of the way Wake Forest was the thing they pointed to. Like, wait a minute, this is our comparable. Like, Wake Forest is a small private institution with academic restrictions and everything else. How is they can sit here and find a window to compete and we can't get out of our own way? I mean, that was the nadir of Duke football. So they committed to football. The Yo Center gets built, all that stuff. They find David Cutcliffe to completely just change the culture. It paid off. Unfortunately, we're now back to that point with Duke, where Wake Forest, with Dave Clawson as the head coach, has this Wake Forest team incredibly competitive after building and building and building, whereas David Cutcliffe has found himself series of mistakes, coordinator changes. Look, it's tough at Duke. I get that. But at this point, I have to imagine that the administration is looking at what's going on at Wake Forest and thinking, we have to find our own younger coach in Dave Clawson to continue what David Cutcliffe had built or rebuilt at Duke.
Yeah, at Duke FB coverage on Twitter actually wrote up a nice little summary of kind of why Duke is where it is now and what he feels like they need to do in terms of Cutcliffe and why he feels that way. And I thought one thing he pointed out that was interesting was, you look at them on the sidelines of some of these games lately, and there's even during some of the worst times at Duke in the past before Cutcliffe, there was an anger sometimes or, a passion and emotion, and he's just not seeing that. And you don't really see that. It just seems to be this resignation to this is what it is. And he talked a lot about some of Cutcliffe's loyalty to assistants, wanting to promote from within, whether or not that was the best thing for the program, things like that. And yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely part of it. I mean, it's hard for a lot of us. I think it's hard for Duke fans because we all like David Cutcliffe as a human being very much. And I've never covered another Duke football coach since I've been doing this. Like, it's
Cutcliffe gets it. He's a football lifer. He understands. I mean, the guy came up how many years did he spend in the SEC? He knows, right? And even at Duke, there's going to be expectations for a football team.
Somebody was asking me yesterday, what would Duke expect that would be, is there something Duke can get that's like are they gonna, or do they want to contend for division titles? Do they want to like contend for ACC? Like, what do they want? Or do they just want to contend for the Coastal every couple years, and usually get to bowls?
That's exactly
that's really what they want. I think Duke fans understand what this is. They know they're not going to be out there competing for a national championship, but they also just, this ain't it. Whatever this is.
Wake Forest is it again,
right?
Wake Forest continues to be the analogous to Duke. They're in the Atlantic. They find themselves now again in a position where even when they weren't finding a window like this year with Clemson being in a reset season, right, or Florida State being somewhat down, right, Wake still is competitive, all right, at least be difficult. The problem for Duke over the last couple of years is that there's just been this steady decline where they're no longer difficult, they're no longer punchy. And we've seen that multiple times this season. And it's unfortunate because, again, on one hand, you have to commend David Cutcliffe for completely breathing new life into Duke football and getting to an ACC championship game. But again, he of all the people, like, Cutcliffe is going to understand this isn't acceptable. And that's why I wouldn't be surprised at the end of the season he ends up retiring. And then he could just go be the moderator for the Manning cast on Monday Night Football.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. And I mean, if you're kind of like analogous program as Wake Forest, and 2 out of the last 3 times you played them, they beat you. I think it was 59-3 a few years ago, and 48-7 now. I mean, that ain't Bama you're talking about. That's Wake. No. It's not good. And no offense to Wake, who one of their fans was like, our defense is fine. We shut out Duke. And I wasn't saying that your defense, I do think some of the problems with your defense are a little exaggerated, but Carolina also pretty much shut down Duke. Virginia literally shut them out and just allowed BYU to put up 66. So I'm just saying, let's not assume that all their problems are solved now. That's all.
That's good. That's going to wrap it up for this edition of the ACC Panic Room. We'll see you all later in the week because basketball season is underway, Lauren.
Sort of. I mean, I can't.
Look, just the way Duke looked against Winston-Salem State. I'm just ready to Final Four.
At least one Duke team can score against Winston-Salem.
Ooh. All right, you're foul for that one, Lauren.
I know.
We'll see y'all next week.